Hi, I'm Kaylee. Welcome. So, I definitely had a lot of time on my hands lately, so I'm going to be sharing with you everything that I read during quarantine. Alright, so the first book that I read was Second Chance Summer by Morgan Matson. Now, she's the author who also wrote Since You've Been Gone, and I think this is one of her earlier novels because I believe this came out in 2012. This book centers around our protagonist Taylor and her family. And so her family owns this lake house, but she hasn't been back in a few years since an incident happened within her French group and she kind of ran away. But sadly, her dad gets the news that he has cancer and that this most likely will be his last summer. So his wish is to have the whole family spend it together up at the lake house. And so Taylor is then confronted with her past and her present, unable to run away this time. Now, as the title suggests, this is a book all about second chances and what you do with them when you have the chance. So I really like this book. I gave it a 3.5. I thought it had a good balance of being that wholesomeness that you expect from a book that's about family and friends and maybe a little romance, while also balancing the more heavy topics that it discusses. So I would definitely pick this one up if you are in the mood for a romance that also has a lot of weight to it. I think I would classify this way more as a YA contemporary than I would as a romance, and I personally enjoy those more. So that is that one. The next book that I read was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Now, this is one of Reese Witherspoon's book club picks, and I would highly recommend checking her book club out and looking at her Hello Sunshine production company's Instagram account because I really enjoy them, and their whole message is about female-driven stories and female empowerment. So I would highly recommend looking into it if you are in the need of more of that content in your life, which, I mean, I feel like we all could use more of that content. Anyway, I actually read 2 of her book club picks during quarantine, and so this is the first one. And this book takes place through the later 50s and then into and throughout the 60s in a small town in North Carolina. And it centers around the life of our main character, Kaya Clark, otherwise known as the Marsh Girl. So this book is interesting because it has kind of 2 simultaneous timelines, and our main one is the life of Kaya and also leading up to this investigation. And our other timeline is the investigation where, let's say, the golden boy of the white side of town is found dead, and Kaya's the main suspect. So we have everything leading up to the incident and then the investigation. And so I found that this book was kind of a slow start that never really picked up for me. It is very heavy in details, especially about nature. Now, ultimately, this book for me was about perseverance and how you survive against all odds and whatever life throws at you. So for that aspect of this book, it was great. If you're in the mood for a female story where she overcomes all odds, this is one of the books for you. But personally for me, I felt as though I was more getting through this book than I was enjoying it. I know a lot of people really love it, but I gave this book a 3. It is a really heavy book. There's a lot of things that Kaya goes through in her life that could be triggers for some people. So just bear that in mind when you are looking into this book. So the next book that I read was The House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. Now, this book is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling. It follows our protagonist Anna Lee and her family, and they live in this seaside town / island, and they are one of the prominent families who live there. It doesn't say what time period that this takes place, and so it's more of a fantasy novel. So her family is believed to be cursed by everyone in town because it seems that her sisters have began dying off one after the other. And the sisters are starting to believe that they actually are cursed. And so they find a portal that leads them to any land they want to go to. And they, at night, are able to dance at these elaborate balls and take their mind off of their possible impending curse that's looming over them. So the whole time throughout the story, you're trying to figure out, is there actually a curse? Or is this someone killing the sisters? And if so, why? So I was really enjoying this book. I loved the atmosphere. It was just what I was in the mood for. But then I really did not like the ending that the author chose. I felt as if it was very much rushed and kind of out of nowhere, and I'll just say that I would have preferred if they left this as a mortal endeavor. It just had so many avenues that it could have taken that it didn't, so I gave it a 2. Very disappointed by this book, but that was my experience with it. Then the next book that I read was We Have Always Lived in a Castle, or The Castle, by Shirley Jackson. She is the author who also wrote The Lottery, which you probably read in school. I read it in school. Or The Haunting of Hill House, so the Netflix show, the book behind it. So this, I would say it's a modern classic, and it's in the genre of like suspense horror. So it centers around our protagonist Meerkat and her sister Constance and their uncle, who are the last survivors of their family after the rest of the family was found dead a few years ago. And they live in this big house and an estate on the edge of town, and all the townspeople don't like them, and vice versa. They don't really mesh with the townspeople. So it's going fine until their routine is disrupted by a potential family member, at least he claims to be, who comes and asks to stay with them. Now, I found this book to be very predictable. I think I called the ending, I want to say, in like chapter 2. I was very disappointed. I wanted more horror and more suspense that I never really got from this book. Now, I think it could also be that I have already seen or read things where this happened that probably drew from this book. So for that reason, I gave this book a 3 rather than a 2, because I feel like it has had an influence on the genre and people have drawn from it. So just because I've already seen things that have come after it, it was probably most definitely very suspenseful for its time. So it doesn't deter me from reading other things by her. I really did like The Lottery, and I would like to read Hill House. I know my brother gave this book a 4, so I think it just depends on what your expectations are going into the book and if you'll be let down or not. The next book that I read was Beartown by Fredrik Backman. Now, this book was translated from Swedish into English, and I believe this was the first translated book that I've ever read, like, into English that wasn't for school. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it centers around a small hockey town in the middle of the woods in Sweden. And now this town has been beginning to be consumed and suffocated by the larger towns and the larger companies in the surrounding area. So the town has kind of put all of their hopes and dreams onto their junior hockey team, because this is the first time in a really long time that they made it to semifinals and have a chance of making it to the championship and winning, which would then bring in a lot of attention and more people coming to the town. So all of that rests on the shoulders of these teenage boys. And there is a violent act that happens right before the semifinals that then will make everybody in this town question their own beliefs. I think that Fredrik Backman does an amazing job of creating this town and really fleshing out these round characters who all their lives intertwine. So it really makes you feel and see a small town like you would expect it. And Benji is my favorite. We love Benji. We need to protect Benji at all costs. Definitely, he's the one that I love. There's also others that I grew to hate in this. So this isn't the Mighty Ducks, just so you know that going into it. It's not the Mighty Ducks. Kind of thought that I might be getting a nice warm fuzzy feeling from this book, but that shuts you down right in the first page, so don't expect that. It's way more about the human experience and ultimately what people will do to protect the things that they love. And so I gave this book a 4 stars. Now there is a sequel, but I don't know if I'm going to pick that one up. I kind of wish that this was just a standalone. The ending really set it up for the sequel, but I don't know if I'm going to read it, so we'll leave it at that. So the next book that I read was The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. Now this also takes place in a seaside town, but this time in Oregon. And so 2 centuries ago, these 3 sisters were accused of witchcraft and drowned in the harbor. And now every year since, they come back for this short time period in the summer between the solstices by inhabiting the bodies of local girls and then luring boys into the harbor and drowning them. And now the town has learned to accept it almost, and this event has become a sort of tourist trap where people flock to see glimpses of the Swan Sisters, where a lot of tourists have died as well. So our protagonist, Penny, began to be numb to what happens every year and accept it. But then she meets an outsider, Bo, who then she later has to decide if she's going to save herself or save him. Now, I didn't particularly care for the twist in this book. I gave it a 3. I think that it would be a much better film. I feel like the concepts would just come across better on screen than they did on page, and I think that it would have more of an audience as a film than versus a book. Great ideas. I just think the execution would be better on screen. So, if it's ever made a movie, I'll definitely watch it, but I don't think I would ever pick it up again. So the final book that I read during quarantine is the other Reese Witherspoon book club pick that I was talking about, and it is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. Now, this book focuses on the lives of two women and how their lives then intertwine and entangle. And so first we have Alex Chamberlain, a well-off white woman who calls up her babysitter, Myra, to come and take her toddler out to the local supermarket because an incident happened at her house. And so it's late at night on a weekend, and Myra agrees to go. And so there at the supermarket, she is confronted and accused of kidnapping the child when a customer sees a black woman with a white child. And so this whole incident is caught on camera by a bystander. And now this all happens within the first chapter. There is no giving away here. And so from this incident is really, you see then how their two lives intertwine and entangle more than they already did. And it is a really great social commentary on race. So I would recommend it for that. But also it talks about something that like I haven't seen many things talk about, or people in general talk about. It mentions the fact that Amira is going to be turning 26 shortly, and so that means that she will be off of her family's insurance, and so that's a big stressor on her. And also the fact that we're just supposed to have our lives together by the time that we're 26, and this is such a topic that I feel like no one talks about, but we should be talking about. So I would definitely recommend this book. I gave it a 4 stars. It's after the initial incident, I felt slow, but then it really picks up after part 3, just so you know. So it has been talked about a lot all over the internet for good reason. I feel like everyone has read it during quarantine, so I recommend. Those are all the books that I have read during quarantine. I hope that you enjoyed. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I will link all of these books and where you can get them in the description. I got most of them from my library, or they were just on my shelf, but I'll make sure to link them all so you can check them out if you would like to and purchase them. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.